Max Markham. I'm the executive director of the policing project at NYU Law. Many of you know that NYU stands for New York University. For those of you who don't know, New York University is located in New York City, which is home of the New York Knicks, who are making us all proud, representing in the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999. I'm not wearing the hat today, so I just had to remind you guys that where the loyalties lie. Yesterday's energy was incredible. This is the third year, as many of you know, that we're doing this. Some of y'all have been here since the first year. And I know it's always hard to come back for day two, but there are 450 of you all, leaders, responders, visionaries from across the country, here to further the work, to better serve your communities, and to ensure that this movement is rooted in care and permanence for decades to come. So a couple of big takeaways from yesterday that I want to reiterate back to you. We heard about the raw reality of building out this field, and I know I drew inspiration from some of the madly motivated moms, at least 3 of them, Melissa, Tawn, and Tansy, and how they lifted up what we owe each other and what we owe ourselves. They reminded us that there's a profound human cost and sense of moral urgency that drives this work. The plenaries yesterday didn't shy away from hard conversations and hard truths either. The challenges of political pressure and the power dynamics that stand in the way of what may otherwise be simple fixes. We heard from police, fire, 911, community leaders about the necessary friction in building trust. And my takeaway from both of the plenaries was that coexistence isn't passive. It's a constant struggle that requires active, intentional relationship building. Our workshop blocks yesterday mapped out immediate operational mechanics, from internal and tactical issues, live response scenarios, navigating multi-jurisdictional county environments, leveraging computer-aided dispatch, data to optimize the dispatch. And we learned how to cost the call to prove our fiscal worth. We explored embedding community engagement to help transition pilots into permanent municipal services. As you all know just as well, if not better than me, alternative response was spoken about not long ago in whispers and in aspirational tones. It was treated like boutique pilot projects or radical experiments on the margins of public safety. But today we're no longer experimental. We're an industry. We're fundamental, and we're rapidly becoming an indispensable pillar of the public safety ecosystem. And that's why our focus at this event is on establishing permanence. Before we dive into today's agenda, I want to take a collective breath and acknowledge all that people have already accomplished. You've shifted the national conversation, you've rewritten local and state policies, and most fundamentally, you've saved lives and brought dignity to people experiencing some of their worst moments. And you've taught the country that people should not be judged by the sum of their worst moments, but instead by the sum of their best moments and their potential for good. And you should take pride in that, and I know I take pride in being a part of that movement. But as I always tell my teams, the reward for doing good work is the opportunity to do more work. And today is about looking forward. It's about what's next for this field and what's next for each of you individually. Today's agenda builds on what we heard yesterday and a few things that are still left unsaid. So we're going to dive into how alternative response is playing out here in Chicago. I'm looking forward to moderating that conversation with the wide variety of thoughtful Chicago leaders. And then to close out the day, we're going to be talking about how to learn from and work with our partners in the violence intervention space. And that's a plenary I'm really, really excited to see on the agenda. I'm glad we're connecting the dots between 2 distinct modes of community care. And then in our workshops, we'll expand the boundaries of what alternative response and first response means. The options in the morning aren't just about tweaking old models, they're about stretching the canvas and looking at new and existing models and how we can fold them into that alternative response umbrella, building on long-standing methods of community mediation, trust building, and new ways of training and workforce development. Our afternoon workshops will shift from expansion to durability. We'll focus on the finish line. Passing the law or securing an initial pilot is no longer the end goal. So these sessions will focus on building systems that outlast political cycles and budget cliffs. We'll think about how local electeds, even in the face of dwindling federal support and municipal budget crises, can be fighting for financial sustainability. So the afternoon workshops are for builders who want to make sure their programs are still thriving 10, 20, 30 years from now. A couple of housekeeping things. Before we wrap for the day, we're going to hear some really exciting results from Dr. Chris Giacomantonio, who you heard from yesterday morning. So just a reminder, it's not too late to head over to the Con boardroom to chat with Chris and get the creative naming juices flowing. I also want to give another quick shout to and thank you to our funders and sponsors. Definitely don't forget to check out the vendor tables outside. We have folks from NAMI, from Beacon, from Rainbow Health, Spiridian Technologies, and others. And as you look at the trajectory for today, I want to challenge you. I want to leave you with a challenge. Many of you spend the vast majority of your time in the trenches of this work, dealing with daily logistics, data tracking, bureaucratic hurdles, hiring, firing, job descriptions, performance evaluations, not to mention the intense emotional weight of responding to crises. So you'd be forgiven for developing tunnel vision. But this space is about lifting yourselves up out of that daily grind. You have an opportunity here to look to the future. We're in the midst of a transition to institutionalization. We started as disruptors, and we're now focusing on permanence. But those institutions come with expectations and responsibilities. So the challenge for the field is to use this time to think about what standardization looks like. How do we do this without losing our souls, our uniqueness, our connection to community? How do we ensure that crisis response in rural townships is just as robust and compassionate as mid-sized cities? How do we scale programs to cover massive metropolitan areas like Chicago while still being informed by the hyperlocal communities that are most in need? And then there's a challenge for you guys individually. I challenge you to ask yourself, what is my next step in this movement? How do I step into mentorship and leadership to train and engage the next generation? And as the field evolves, how do I continue to move with it and continue to provide value? So let's get to work. And on the topic of challenges, I'm going to ask that you give the next 15 or so minutes of your attention to some speakers who are going to give us a reality check on some of the numbers and stories that drive this work. Since our last convening a whole year ago in New York City, where we announced our 12 Million Calls initiative, we've been thinking about how to collectively weave the thinking and the focus on permanence. You may remember last year, 12 Million Calls is a challenge and a goal to work towards, the idea being that we hold ourselves accountable for a tangible but attainable number of calls diverted from police to alternative response, 12 million calls by 2030, which would be roughly 5% of the nation's annual 911 call volume. And to ground and scale this work and to talk about the opportunity we believe we have to lift up the field, please join me in welcoming Alex Heaton from the Policing Project and the team from Zealous, Asia Johnson and Kelsey Hill.